No, that's easier.
Okay. 2 minutes. Let's wait.
Yeah, so we're going? And is it on?
It's on.
The 2 minutes is up, apparently. My name's Claire Cranville, and I'm a member of the church, and I'm a member of the church council. And I would like to welcome everyone who's come tonight from our local community and our community at large to share in enjoying the space of this room and share our discussion together this evening. Our pastor couldn't be here tonight. Her name's Donna Giver Johnston, and I'm sure she would like to pass that message to you as well. And over to Thaddeus Popovich, who will be leading the message. So welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could come.
My name is Thaddeus Popovich. Some people know me as Ted. I'm moving forward with my given name, like it or not. A little bit about me. I'm a co-founder of ACAN, Allegheny County Clean Air Now. So there are a bunch of us in the room. If you're a co-founder, that means there's more than one of us. Okay. Somehow I assume the leadership mantle. Some more about me. I'm the grandson of immigrants from the Balkans, a grandmother who was totally illiterate in any language. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, worked in industry in Washington County. I lived in a plant. He died from an industrial accident. I had two other uncles who worked in J&L Industries. They died terrible deaths from chronic diseases, which more than likely were caused by working in the environments that they worked in, even though they made good money. I personally have been laid off from industry. I know what that feels like. In 2002, during the dot-com bubble burst, I was with Corning Optical Fiber. We were at the top of the heap in the world, and then suddenly we weren't. So half of my business was told to go, thank you very much. I was better than most. I got early retirement benefits, and I was able to survive and do other things. So I know what it's like to be laid off. I know what it's like to have people in my family suffer from working in heavy-duty industries. So I have empathy and sympathy for any of you who are workers in the room at the Shenango plant. Okay, let's move along. The first slide. Yeah, let's go back to that. So just to frame why we're here, there were some, I had some calls from media saying, well, we would like, who's going to be there? I says, this is the community. It's meant to hear the voices from the community. The industry, like a DTE Energy, they're a Fortune 500 company. They get to talk a lot. They have paid lobbyists that go around to our politicians. We're an informal group. We have no budget. All we have are our voices. And so that's why we're here tonight, to express ourselves with our voices, and to the people from the good people from the EPA and Allegheny County Health Department. That's why we're here. And if you're a member of the community, we welcome you. If you're from outside our community, we welcome you also to hear our stories. If you flip to the next one. And what are we saying here? Okay. This is something, here, I'll take this out. Okay. It's gone? Okay.
There's a mic here for the video recording.
Okay, all right, never mind. So this is something that's in the Pennsylvania State Constitution. It says that we have the right to clean air, clean water, and everything having to do with the environment, and the Commonwealth is responsible that we have that happen to us. It doesn't seem to happen enough, does it? Especially if you live in our valleys here, if you live near fracking sites, if you live near a coal-fired power plant, the environment takes second place. So I just thought I'd remind us of this written into our state constitution, that we deserve this right, not only for us today, but for our children and our grandchildren. So you might find that online and memorize that and talk to your local politicians. So what are you doing for me lately as far as our environment? And also industry as well, okay? Okay, we're into the agenda, and we have some introductions to make. and that's me. So if I may ask, and you can rise if you will, or just wave your hand. So we have 3 people from EPA Region 3 headquarters. That's in Philadelphia. Region 3 encompasses Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, and DC. Did I get that right? And Virginia, okay. That's a lot of area to cover. So I'll first mention David Arnold. He is Acting Director, Air Protection Division. I'll next mention Zelma Maltonado. She is Associate Director for Environment Air Protection Division. And I'll next mention Jim Hagedorn, Senior Inspector Enforcement Air Protection Division. And Jim, I understand you're one of the last few people who really understand the steel industry and coke plants. So we need you to stay on a little bit longer. And next from ACHD, we have Jamie Graham, who heads up our air quality division. And then we have Dean DeLuca, who is enforcement. And then we have our epidemiologist. You can stand up. And she's with us tonight to tell us about and I'm having a mental block. Lynn Marshall. Lynn Marshall. And Lynn Marshall, I should know her because she comes by our houses, and ACHD has been very good at putting in VOC monitors, and also now SUMA canisters funded by EPA. Thank you very much. Okay. Going further, members of our ACAN partners, I think that's the next slide. Okay, so we're not standing alone in this whole effort. So I list in alphabetical order: Clean Air Council, CMU Create Lab, and that's the whole word for the acronym. Okay, I won't say it, you can read it. So, well, I'll say it. It's Community Robotics Education and Technology Environment Lab, Group Against Smog and Pollution, Heinz Endowments, Penn Environment, Penn Future, and the Sierra Club. So we get a lot of help from them, some money on occasion, but mostly moral support. So, and again, ACAN has no budget. We're an informal group. We're not organized. We are not a not-for-profit organization, and we do what we do. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to turn this over now to Michael Bett. So these are some of his slides coming up.
Thanks, Sid. Good evening. My name is Michael Bett. I'm an elected member of Ben Avon Council. ACAN is asking for environmental justice together with the 7 environmental organizations just mentioned and 4 Northborough towns, Ben Avon, Emsworth, Bellevue, and Avalon, which all passed resolutions that seek strict enforcement of environmental regulations at all plants on Neville Island. As indicated by the Toxic 10 report on your chairs, Shenango is a public nuisance that is endangering public health. The plant is in a river valley subject to frequent temperature inversions that creates a brownish haze of smog settling over 70,000 people that live within 3 miles of the plant. Under at least 5 consent decrees since 1980, there's been all too little improvement in this aging facility and continuous flagrant disregard for the public's health. In fact, violations at Shenango Coke Works are not declining, but continue to rise over the past 4 years. We are asking that the EPA reopens the previous consent decrees. The health of our 70,000 residents far outweighs the benefit of some 140 or so regional jobs. DTE Shenango has such low regard for public health that they have no means to alert local communities in the event of a disaster or emergency. And at the meeting at the plant, when we asked what their safety plan was, as they are required to have to operate, the plant manager's response was to call 911. This is unacceptable. For far too long, the profits of DTE Energy, a Fortune 500 company, have been put ahead of the well-being and health of the citizens. These health costs are borne by some of our poorest communities and not the source of the pollution. For example, our local paper, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, review of the State Department of Environmental Protection data shows that Bellevue men are dying at a rate of 178% of the expected number of respiratory deaths. That means we would expect 100% if we were normal, but it's 78% above the expected rate. Women's death rate is at 128% in Bellevue. Avalon is similar with death rates at 138 and 111% respectively. The city of Pittsburgh, 119 and 108%. The story is similar for many of the surrounding communities, as well as for heart disease and lung cancer. We need environmental justice in this region. According to the Pittsburgh Regional Environmental Threats, PRETA, conducted by the Center for Healthy Environments and Communities at the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public Health, the facility's emissions are a predominant source of cancer risk in the airshed, eclipsed only by the U.S. Steel Coke Battery in Clairton. Illegal commissions continue at Shenango DTE Energy with no end in sight. Shenango Coke Works is the only heavy industry in this area with significant emissions. The fines currently imposed are insignificant in comparison to the expected profits from the 1,500 tons of coal that are processed at Shenango every day. Fines need to be raised significantly to be exponentially increased so they encourage real change and not only the cost of doing business. Two recent concerns demonstrate DTE Shenango's laissez-faire attitude. In 2013, a valve broke at the plant. This resulted in a 16-week period during which the plant was not put into hot idle, i.e. no more coke production, but continued operating, spewing pollution. Nearly half of the pushing operations, that's removing the coke from the ovens, resulted in air quality violations. Fadi Morad, Environmental Safety and Non-Utility Environmental Affairs Director at DTE Energy, and Chris Keisling, a previous plant manager, said the problem was because they do not understand the plant and that they were still finding surprises after 4 years of ownership. This is unacceptable. To cause this harm to the public's health, if this facility cannot reach and maintain the highest level of compliance to protect the public's health, then it needs to be put in hot idle or permanently shut down. The area near Neville Island is heavily populated, and these violations are harming our health. This year there were 6 power outages, some lasting over an hour. This spewed raw coke gas and its associated contaminants into the atmosphere. Duquesne Light had warned DTE Energy of the need to upgrade their power, but in a predictable fashion, as per DTE Shenango's normal operating procedure, this advice had been ignored to the detriment of our community. I'm asking the EPA to help us provide environmental justice, reopen the consent decrees. Thank you.
By the way, it's, we make it sound simple that one can reopen consent decrees. It's not easy. Okay, and EP and ACHD folk will talk about that and suggest there could be other tools at our disposal. So those of us in the community may have jumped the gun saying that's possible, and I'll take ownership of part of that. But we're hoping for the best. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. So we have, and let's go back to the agenda slide first, okay? All right. So now we have a statement, well, let me see. Is Louis going, are you going to say something? Okay. Oh, Angelo's going to say something next, okay. Okay, sorry. So Angelo's going to give us an abbreviated litany of what we've been up to over the last couple of years.
My name's Angelo Turano. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And a special thanks to everyone who also came last November, because the meeting last November really inspired us and gave us some momentum to increase our advocacy for clean air. And since last November, and as Thaddeus mentioned, we're a small volunteer organization, but we have, our members are very passionate about improving air quality. So in the past year, we've been very active in our advocacy. And there is a list. I'm going to go through in a kind of an abbreviated recital of this list, but there's a list on the tables as you come in if you want to pick one up. But since last November, we have done, among other things, we have testified at 4 Board of Health meetings. We've met 3 times as a group with the Health Department staff. We've gotten BBC to do a story about Shenango and our work, which aired on BBC World News. We met in Philadelphia with Sean Garvin, the Region 3 EPA administrator. 7 of us went by train to Philadelphia for that meeting. Subsequent to that, Sean Garvin and his staff came twice to Pittsburgh to see Shenango firsthand and to meet with us. On the first day of spring last year, we presented Shenango with the Closed Window Award to signify that we can't open our windows on nice days because of the odors and the air pollution. 4 of us bought shares in DTE Shenango, and in May went to their shareholder meeting in Washington, D.C. To testify about the pollution that Shenango is throwing into the community here, and the health effects on residents. We also initiated a stories project with the help of our friends at the Create Lab at CMU. And that's a project where we record stories of people in the community that have been impacted by the pollution from DTE Shenango. 4 of those stories have been written up and are on the tables coming in as you came in. Those are a sampling, and those stories really get across how air pollution here is impacting residents. We also testified at County Council to oppose the appointment of someone to the Air Pollution Advisory Committee that had a clear conflict of interest because he represented Shenango. We worked with the CMU Create Lab in launching the Shenango channel that they'll be talking about later on. We got over 250 signatures on the petition that you have at your seat, a petition that we are going to be presenting to EPA concerning the reopening of these consent decrees. We encouraged the 4 boroughs, Bellevue, Avalon, Benavon, and Emsworth, to pass resolutions asking the health department to better regulate the industries on Neville Island concerning air pollution. And all 4 of them adopted those resolutions. The last one just this week, the Avalon Council. And their resolutions list a number of demands. I'll just talk about 3 of them. One was to ensure that the industrial plants are meeting all federal and local air quality regulations. The second one, assess fines to the maximum extent for violations by these plants. And the third, requiring these plants to limit their emissions on air quality days when, usually through a weather inversion, the air pollution just sits in the valleys, and where the effect of that air pollution is multiplied because of that. We have, and for many of these activities, we've gotten a lot of press coverage just to keep this issue in front of the public and to try to get the health department and our other public officials to act to clean up our air. Thank you. I'm also going to present the borough resolutions to Jamie Graham for the health department and Dave Arnold with the EPA.
Thank you, Angela. Louis, are you up next? And you can, Louis is another co-founder. We who have blue shirts are so honored to have blue shirts, frankly. Okay.
Not red shirts. Not red shirts. Red shirts. Red shirts always get killed. My name is Louis, Bellevue resident, member of Allegheny County Clean Air Now. And what does the Bible say? Yea, though I walk through the valley in the shadow of death. Over there, you see the shadow of death. My wife and myself, we live in the shadow of death. Your kids live in the shadow of death. You live in the shadow of death. What do we have? 50% higher rates of asthma, heart disease, cancer here. My wife has asthma. We come from New York. We came here about 6 years ago. And New York's not the cleanest city in the world. I remember seeing rats bigger than my arm there, cockroaches the size of my hand, you know? And yet her asthma was never as bad as it is here. And I'm sure some of you have experienced it. Northgate High School here has terrible asthma rates. And I guess the question is, do you want to do something about it? Do you want to continue living in the shadow of death or not? The question I have, I guess, is right now is we want, to convince the Allegheny County Health Department and the Environmental Protection Agency to reopen the 2012 and 2014 consent decrees and to do whatever else is necessary to reduce violation emissions from DTE Shenango. Allegheny County Clean Air Now wants a place at the table, too. We don't want to just have these negotiations going on behind closed doors. That's been happening for too long now. These doors need to be open. We need some transparency as to what the heck's going on. I mean, the fines for violations at Shenango are as little as $500. That's a parking ticket. Parking ticket for people. And this company's killing us, all right? I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar company, and I know Pittsburgh has a legacy of steel, and I respect that legacy. It's an important legacy. But DTE is not a Pittsburgh company. They're a Michigan company. Those guys are earning dividends and capital gains off of our backs and our lungs. And they're not even here. They're not living here. And it's time for a change. So right now, if you look on your chair, there's a little blue slip. That's a petition. It's a postcard petition. And it's asking you to sign the petition to get the EPA and the ACHD to do its job and protect us. What is it? If you're walking through the shadow of death, your rod and your staff is supposed to comfort you. But right now, it doesn't seem like it's comforting us. The EPA and the ACHD are the rod and the staff, and we need them to open this consent decree and do something. Thank you.
I really like Louis. He's a New Yorker, and I used to live in New York. I appreciate New Yorkers. Thank you. Okay. The next on their agenda will be, let me see if I can see this right. Okay, we're moving into statements of need. So we have a few key speakers here who are going to stand up for us and talk about what they're doing and how they're helping us. So first we'll call on the CREATE Lab. And I just told you what that stands for. There's a test at the end of the evening. Okay. And Randy Sargent is here, so he's the lead person. And we have 3 others, Ilya, Paul and B, okay? And Yensha, okay. So the mic needs to stay there.
We're honored at Carnegie Mellon to be involved in collaborating as well as we can with Allegheny County Clean Air Now. I just want to say 10 seconds worth, and I'll turn it over to Randy Sargent, who leads the visualization and machine learning work that we're doing on this problem for Allegheny County Clean Air Now and for Shenango. The thing that we believe and that we think is really important for everybody to understand is that we can invent new technologies, but we can do it in the service of public good. We can make technologies that cause local communities to be able to have just as much power over data that helps them make a case intelligently, a case backed up with evidence that they can take to officials like our friends who are visiting from the EPA. So we believe in constantly refining that data and creating new tools that the public can use, so the public has just as much information about what's happening transparently as used to be the purview of government and corporation. And so I'll turn it over to Randy for that.
Thanks everyone for having us here today. You've seen a number of these videos from Shenango. You see them all over the screen on the right, or on your left, and up here now. These are from a pair of cameras. One was set up by a community member here, and one was set up by the county health department. And these are being continuously recorded every 5 seconds. And we can go back through those and find the sorts of events we're looking at here. So the event we're looking at just on this one is the power failure back from June. It was perhaps one of the worst events we've seen. Flip to the next slide, please. Here's an assortment of events from the month before, just from May. And you'll see the different sorts of emissions coming out of Shenango are different colors. You see black, you see brown, you see yellow, you see blue. And each one of these different colors represents different sorts of substances that are coming out, none of which are good for us to breathe. Keep going. So the community here has a long history of watching Shenango. There's a group called the Smoke Watchers that will go out and actually take a clipboard and wait for an hour and watch the different parts of Shenango and what they're emitting. And in the tradition of that, we've set up a way for these cameras, which again the community and the health department set up, to be able to go look at these cameras and watch Shenango. So instead of spending an hour out at Metro Motors, you can spend an hour at your computer and see maybe a whole day in the fast forward. And what you're seeing here is a document put together. This is, I think, from June this past year, from volunteers across through ACAN, going through and finding all the different emissions events. And this is a 70-page document, so you probably can't even see the whole thing from back where you are. In service of finding events and not taking as long to look through them, Yingsha in the audience, raise your hand, Yingsha, wrote some interesting computer algorithms to locate the smoke. So if you go to the next tab, this is a set of smoke events, emissions events, fugitive emissions events, over the course of a few months. So actually this first document is only 2 months worth, and I don't think we'll get to the end of it. Then we're still like maybe 20% into it. So you get the idea, and so we have thousands and thousands of these things going on where you can see things. Now, when you look at Shenango, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between steam and the smoke, but believe me, all these are smoke and not steam. It's good. We'll share the link to this, and you can take a look. Next tab. So what we'd like to show tonight, for the first time now in public, is what we call the Shenango Channel. And we built this in conjunction with the folks of ACAN. We designed it to have the 2 cameras and to have also a set of other information about what's happening to the air. So if we look up at the top, you'll see there's a video, and what we're seeing is actually from today, and it's I don't know if we're going to have a good enough network to show the video live, but this is actually the live website that we're pulling up. If you go look around the page, you'll see kind of on the bottom right, you'll see a map of the area. And you see a few little bars, a little bar graph and a little arrow showing which direction the wind's going. On the lower left, what you'll see is line charts showing you different sensors in the area showing particulates in the air. The top one is actually the county particulate, PM2.5, and you want to see that generally below 12. and it goes above 12 a lot here. Then the ones below that are in individual community members' homes, outside the homes. So let's see if we can maybe, we may be off on the network here. So, yeah, I think we may have a problem with the wireless. I apologize. It's remarkable to me watching the events through the camera, and for the first times, coming out here and setting up the cameras. I heard stories from people in the community, and some of the stories were kind of hard to believe. Like, things were a lot worse on the weekends than the weekdays, and things like this. But the evidence bears it out. I mean, seeing this, it's kind of hard to dispute what we actually see. So let's zoom out a bit on the chart on the bottom there. So Ila's going to zoom out, and what you're seeing across the very top there is all these little red and yellow dots. If you can see them, hopefully you can see them even from the back. Those are all reports of smells. So in addition to the images, in addition to the measurements of particulates, we have people using their cell phone reporting smell levels, and the red ones are the worst ones. And you see it's mostly red ones. If we zoom out enough, you'll see them month after month, week after week. We have hundreds and hundreds of these reports, and these are especially the things that tend to be clustered around the weekends and the evenings. So why don't we? If we can, is that going to show up? So I think let's. So we may be able to demonstrate more of this later when the network's back on, but let's go ahead and skip to the next slide. But I encourage you before we leave the Shenango channel, if you go to Shenango channel, all one word, shenangochannel.org, you'll be able to see this yourself. You'll be able to go and see for yourself. You don't have to trust us what Shenango looks at. Look at for yourself. There are tools on there when you find something that you want to email to someone else. You can say share, and you can draw a little rectangle around the thing that happened, and copy it and paste it into your email and send it off, and it'll send a little animated GIF for people who know what that is. So let's go to the next slide. This is the cell phone app that lets you report smell. And at the moment, it's not easy to get, you can't download it from the App Store yet. So if you are interested to report smells and have it show up in the public, come talk to us afterwards, and we'll set you up. Next slide, please. What we found, in addition to the smells being clustered on the weekends, we also find that with some of the people who are recording the smells, when you get the very worst smells, we had what are called SUMA canisters to take a grab sample of the air and actually see, well, what's in the air? When it smells bad, is it actually bad for you? The answer is yes. It's hard to see on the print here. I apologize. I should have made this a little bit bigger. But one of the things you would see there is about 9 to 10 parts per billion benzene, which is really too high. We don't want to be breathing that level of benzene. Next slide, please. So in summary, we see Shenango polluting the air. You can see it graphically. It's hard to disagree. We believe, based on what we're seeing, that Shenango is in regular violation of fugitive emission permit. So the permit says you can emit certain types of things in certain places, and we see things that we believe, that we're pretty sure are in violation of that permit. But it's also, I have to say, it's also hard to prove because the views from our cameras can't see the precise location of the emission. Keep going. We also believe Shenango is in violation of permit by emitting these nuisance odors. Once again, this is a hard thing to prove, to say it was Shenango and not something else on Neville Island, but based on what we see, we believe it's that. Again, we need to get more evidence to be able to make this violation stick. But it's clear to us, looking at the images and looking at the reports of smell, that that's what's happening. It's coming from Shenango. We see that the smell reports correlate with toxic air. So if you smell it and it smells bad, you probably do want to be inside. And finally, we know that it's possible to get better evidence. We know that it's possible to put cameras with a better view. There are better places to put sensors. And we need cooperation to cite those. We believe from the earlier consent decree that ACHD, the health department has the ability to put devices to measure. So for example, a camera that can actually see the point of emission, which we would be happy to provide. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
We are extremely, extremely fortunate to have people of the caliber from the CMU Create Lab work with us. I'm just astounded. Randy came out to my place in Ben Avon and personally set up these spec monitors. They're still B monitors, right? But just to verify the particulate readings that we're getting off the Avalon monitor. So he personally came out and set up these devices in our homes and our residences. So kudos to you. And I'm sorry, I have to mention that. So we get Randy from NASA. And guess what he was doing at NASA at one time? He was mapping the surface of Mars. Right? Did I say that right? He's a little humble about that. So if he can map Mars, he can map Shenango. Okay? So thank you for being here with us. Okay? And of course, the rest of the Create Lab people. Let's move on to, now to change horses a bit, we have with us a religious leader, Father John Geitzer. He is the chaplain for Little Sisters of the Poor, and we like to think this is also a morality issue. And thank you, Pope Francis, for coming to our country and spreading the news in his encyclical. And Father John may share some of his kind words with us. Thank you.
I appreciate being invited here. But I have to say, this is the first time I've gone to church to look at dirty pictures. What I'm going to read to you is just an overview of some the Pope's writing in the recent encyclical on the environment that he calls On Care for Our Common Home. So I'll make this very brief. Praise be to you, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth. This sister now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her. The destruction of the human environment is extremely serious, not only because God has entrusted the world to us, but because human life is itself a gift which must be defended. St. Francis of Assisi is the example par excellence of care for the vulnerable and of an integral ecology. He was particularly concerned for God's creation and for the poor and outcast. The environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all. Exposure to atmospheric pollutants produced a broad spectrum of health hazards, especially for the poor, and causes millions of premature deaths. Our industrial system, at the end of its cycle of production and consumption, has not developed the capacity to absorb and reuse waste and byproducts. There is an urgent need to develop policies so that the emission of carbon dioxide and other highly polluting gases can be drastically reduced. A sober look at our world shows that the degree of human intervention, often at the service of business interests and consumerism, is actually making our earth less rich and beautiful. We can be silent witnesses to terrible injustices if we think that we can obtain significant benefits by making the rest of humanity, present and future, pay the extremely high costs of environmental deterioration. Never have we so hurt and mistreated our common home as we have in the last 200 years. On many concrete questions, the Church has no reason to offer a definitive opinion, but we need only take a frank look at the facts to see that our common home is falling into serious disrepair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father John. I might add to that, the EPA has a website, which we can all go to, which cites the demographics around the Shenango plant. So within a 3-mile radius of Shenango live 70,000 of us, pretty highly dense population. And if you look at the demographics for income, 1/3 of us live below the poverty line. That's outrageous. We have an environmental justice area. We talk about it, but nobody does anything about it. So thank you, Father John, for reminding us of our responsibilities. Okay, next we'll have a health professional be with us, and that's Martha Haley. She is a radiation oncologist.
Thanks for asking me to speak this evening. I'm Marcia Haley, actually. Sorry, Ted. I'm a radiation oncologist and assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm here tonight out of concern for the people that live and work in close proximity to the DTE Shenango Coke plant. Now, we know that Pittsburgh and Allegheny County have come a long way since 70 years ago, when we used to have to turn the streetlights on at noon in order to see through the smog. But although our air quality has improved over time, it's still not where it should be. We continually make the national list of the worst air quality, and I'm sure that we can do better. When I talk to the Allegheny County Health Department about our poor air quality, an issue that continually comes up is the coke plants. EPA classifies coke oven emissions as a Group A, which are human carcinogens. Several of the byproducts of concern are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, heavy metals, and coal tar volatiles, including benzene. Contact with these substances increases one's risk of cancer. 2 years ago, the University of Pittsburgh School of Public Health published a study that showed that the residents of Allegheny County have an increased risk of cancer compared to those living in surrounding areas due to our air pollution. We also know that air pollution affects non-cancer respiratory illnesses such as asthma. In fact, the highest asthma rates in Allegheny County schools happen to be in the areas around the coke plants. As a physician, I believe it's critical that we address this. Fines are not going to protect the people of the North Boroughs. Controlling the emissions will. Episodes like the venting of raw coke that occurred this spring are absolutely unacceptable. 3 weeks ago, I met with the EPA and White House in Washington, D.C. to address air quality issues, so I know that this administration is forward-thinking on these particular issues. I'm hoping that this meeting will facilitate working together to address the issues that we're talking about tonight and improving the air quality for Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. Thank you.
Sorry I misspoke. I was excited that you were here. I'm human too. Okay. So next we will have a researcher from CMU, Dr. Albert Presto. And if you've seen a little white van bristling with antenna in your neighborhoods, that he may not be the driver, but he's the one responsible for collecting pollution data on a localized basis. Albert?
All right, I have to set my timer because the long version of this takes an hour. So really quickly, I'm going to try and give an overview. Basically, what we've done over the past few years is try and understand how air pollution changes over space in the county. And so I'm going to show several maps to sort of motivate this. I don't expect everyone to sort of suck in all the details because I'm going to go too fast. But any red colors and darker colors are going to be higher concentrations. Sort of blue colors and lighter colors are going to be lower concentrations, right? And really, what we're going to be focusing on are the variations and the differences. So if you can go to the next one. So basically, everything I'm going to show you is backed up with real data. So these are our vans. We did a lot of mobile sampling. Just really quick, the one on the left that's just a plain white van gets pulled over all the time, and the one on the right never. Like, I drove around with that one for a month with like an expired registration and one of the mirrors off and never got pulled over. Okay. So yeah, go ahead to the next one. So we've mapped a lot of pollutants, and I know people here have seen various versions of these. This one is for black carbon particulate matter, so it's stuff that you see out of the stack of a diesel bus. And if you're sitting towards the front or have really good eyes, you can see this one has a road contribution. So the roads are these really thin little red areas. But then you see these red blobs, and a lot of those blobs are either in the river valley and or near industrial areas. And so if you go to the next one, and I apologize, the color contrast on this one isn't quite as good. This is for chromium, which is another component of particulate matter. In the right state, it can be carcinogenic. It's classified as an air toxic. And this doesn't have a roadway component, so you don't see the roads on here. You just sort of see the variation closer to industrial areas. Again, apologize, the color contrast is not so great. And one thing we've done is we've worked with some health folks at Colorado State University, and as you would expect, if you live in sort of the darker areas, your risk goes up, right? Because you're exposed to higher levels of things. So go to the, yeah, we'll do this one. So those were both examples of stuff in particulate matter. We can also care about gases, so benzene is a carcinogen. So here the darker colors are higher concentrations. Now instead of sort of mapping in high detail, we've zoned some areas. But if you see the area that we're in now is not the darkest, that actually happens to be the east end of Pittsburgh, and we're still trying to understand why that is. But you still see where we are standing right now is in one of the higher areas, right? So if you were to move north of here, you would have experienced lower concentrations. So skip the next one, and yeah, there we go. And for these particular gases that we go around and measure, if you just look at the top 5%, like the highest 5% of the concentrations that we measure, overwhelmingly they're in sort of two areas, right? One is this eastern part of Pittsburgh. Some of them are spread around, but then there's a bunch that are in this area. Right, and we know, basically, we know what the sources are, right? The sources, we know where the roads are, we know where the major industrial sources are, and we sort of find high concentrations in areas downwind of that. But it's not necessarily, you don't just have to be right next to the source. These stationary sources have these big plumes that can sort of waft over big areas. So next one is my last one. And this is actually some modeling work we did. This is dispersion modeling, acknowledging that the dispersion model doesn't always work perfectly for areas with all of the valleys that we have. And this is actually an example. This is a model for the Liberty-Clareton area, not for here. But the colors you can see, so where the green dot is and where it's sort of red is right near the industrial area in the Mon Valley. And then the sort of plume sort of travels over big areas. This plume you can actually see in lots of areas of the county, and the same with industrial areas. If you have big emissions from a stationary source, they can get carried by the wind and cover sort of big swaths of area and impact people pretty far downwind who maybe aren't necessarily aware that they're being exposed. So thank you, everyone, and that was my last one.
Thank you, Albert. So I posed the question when I asked Albert if he can come to our session tonight. So if you happen to be watching a Steeler game, which I was at this past weekend, and we had an inversion and the winds were right, or maybe even still, could you be breathing in Shenango?
Yes.
Yes.
The right direction.
Yes, that could happen. That could happen. And while you're
that way very often.
But they don't go that way too often. They come our way more often than not. Okay, so that's a possibility. So think about that the next time you're tailgating down at the Steeler or Pirates game, and figure out which way the wind's blowing. Okay. You do that for the weather, don't you? So we now have the Shenango Channel. You can see which way the wind's blowing from the Shenango Channel as well. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to have the Mayor of Emsworth here. Ah, she's here. Would you like to come up and say a few words? Okay, okay.
How hard you people work?
I'm sorry?
I wasn't aware of how hard these people were working. I am just very grateful that my council did sign the consent.
So Mary is the Mayor of Emsworth. So her council passed a resolution. And her council unanimously passed the resolution where we're asking the health department to do their maximum of their capabilities of keeping pollution under control from Neville Island. Of course, the main polluter is Shenango. So thank you, Mary, for being here, and we thank your council members for passing that resolution. I'd like to, by the way, we invited a whole slew of people to be here, including Senator Casey and Senator Toomey and Mike Doyle, but they're not here. But they know we're here. But I'd like to recognize Brian O'Malley, who is from Adam Ravenstall's office. He made it here tonight. And I'd like to recognize Vicki Donnelly from the Avalon Borough Council. Thank you. So I guess the other people were busy, but they know that we're here. Yes.
You just want to say I'm with Councilwoman Darlene Harris.
Oh yeah. So Councilwoman Darlene Harris is represented, and tell me the name again. Lloyd. Okay, Lloyd is here tonight. In fact, we made a cold call on Darlene Harris's office the other day, and she actually let us in. And thanks to Kathleen. Kathleen lives in Brighton Heights, so she's the main beneficiary, and thank you for being here. Okay. So now we're going to move on to, well, we're describing it as consent decree, but we can't. Okay. Oh, and we really are opening up this next. Sir, am I missing something? Oh, no, Leah. Okay. Leah has the last say in our statements of need, and Leah is, I think she's a real charmer. She has 2 young children, and she's out there with her children a lot, showing up at things. Are they here tonight? They're here tonight.
They're all the way back.
Orion and Dimitri, how are you? And she and her family went to, there they are. And she and her family went to Philadelphia with us, and actually they met Sean Garvin too. Okay, so she's a real trooper. Okay, after you.
Thank you. My name is Leah Andrasik. My family and I live in Avalon. We're less than 1,000 yards downwind of Shenango. For the past 13 years, we've lived in close proximity to the plant on one side of the river to the other. But it wasn't until my oldest child was born prematurely, that I became acutely aware of the fact that the emissions from the plant contain a cocktail of toxic chemicals. When I found this out, I quickly realized that my grandfather's livelihood was very likely a cause of his heart and lung issues. He was a proud and active member of the union, and he spent his whole career on Neville Island working in one of the mills. And while I'm extremely proud of the hard work that he did and the time that he put into advocating for workers' rights with the union, I'm saddened that for the past 20 years, my grandmother and our family has been without him, most likely as a result of this work. And so I come to this with a unique perspective of wanting to protect the future of my children, but also wanting to honor the rich history of all those who fought so hard to protect workers' rights. My hope is that the steelworkers here this evening will make my grandfather and all those who fought before him for workers' rights proud and join us, the community, in demanding better from this billion-dollar company. You and I and my children should not have to bear the brunt of this corporation's unwillingness to address issues before they turn into emergencies. I don't want your children or your grandchildren to have to watch you suffer these ill health effects. I want you to be able to enjoy your retirement without oxygen machines or heart surgeries plaguing it. And most importantly, I just want my children to be able to play outside in their own backyard without fear of what they're breathing in or needing to run indoors because of the terrible odors. You see the power outage that happened. We were outside during that time period, less than 1,000 yards away. This company needs to abide by the existing laws and regulations just like the rest of us do. They should not be allowed to circumvent these laws in order to profit, particularly when it puts all of us at risk. Thank you.
By the way, Leah has shared with us they're thinking of moving on soon because it's too risky of a place for her and her family to live. And that's what we're up against. I had a neighbor across the street from me who moved because of her condition with being a diabetic, and she believes, and her doctors believe, that the pollution source here from Neville Island caused that to happen. They moved several months ago. Not a pretty sight. So now we're going to an area which we have our invited guests from the EPA and ACHD to talk to us. We put it under the rubric of consent decrees. I guess we're moving ahead too quickly with that idea, and so I apologize for that. I got excited that I thought maybe we could talk about that. But instead, we'll talk about things that may work around that or some solutions to our issues on a day-to-day basis. So I offer up Jamie Graham.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me and all of us here tonight. When Thaddeus talked to us about coming here, he wanted to keep it short because this is your meeting to hear what you have to say. So I only have a few slides. I wanted to talk. The two questions he asked me were consent orders and the electric outages that's happened this year. And so that's what I'm going to speak on, is those two issues. And if we can pull it up. Yeah, they're short, but it'll help to go through it. There are two decrees that we're under right now. Now, a consent decree or a consent order is an agreement between two parties. It could be about anything. In this case, it's air pollution. It's about air pollution. If it's filed in a court, then the decree becomes owned by the court, and the court owns it. And we have two decrees that we're working on right now with Shenango. It's not unusual. We sometimes I'll have different decrees. They are on different subjects and on different issues. And so let's go ahead to the first slide. And the first one that we're working under is the 2012, which is a federal consent decree. It's filed in the federal court. It's between us, EPA, and Shenango, and maybe even DEP, because there's water issues in there. I'm getting a nod, so DEP as well. So all of us have been in the federal court, not me, but my predecessors were in federal court to agree upon this consent decree. And there are three parts to it. One was clean air compliance, one is emission monitoring, which is the stack. Now this one's pretty much, the second one is really the stack having a monitor that continually measures the stack. And the third was some clean water. And I'm not going to really go into clean water because I don't know much about it, and since today is an air issue. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about these things. The Clean Air Act compliance requirements in the 2012 consent decree is the combustion stack standards. There's a particulate standard, and then there's the two opacity standards. And I think most of you know the two opacity standards. No more than 20% opacity over more than 3 minutes of an hour, and not more than 60% opacity at any time during that hour. And and then the actual grain loading particulate standards. So those are the three standards that are in the consent decree. There's also a number of inspection and maintenance activities that they have to do. There's some things they have to do on an annual basis, things they have to do every time there's an exceedance. There's a number of tests they have to do, reviews they have to do, and reports they have to put together. And then a whole list of end-flue repairs. Now, end-flue is if you have your oven, you have like about 29 heating elements going all the way down the edge from one edge to the other. These flues at the end, the end flues, are more likely to get crudded up because the door is open, the door is closed. You got your 18, probably there's some steel workers in here can explain this a lot better than me, but as you open the doors, you close the doors, the temperature difference makes those end flues go bad faster than the ones in the middle. So what was in the 2012 consent decree was a list of end flues that needed to be repaired over a certain period of time, and any kind of welding that needed to be done around them. So those were the things that were in and are in the federal consent decree. And as Ted said, I think we had some confusion here. We're not looking to open either consent decree actually at this time. We don't know if we can because, again, it belongs to the federal court. It doesn't belong to us. But what we are looking at is going through line by line through the consent decree to make sure that everything is in order. Everything is being done to minimize. Now, this one is for the stack emissions, like I said. Everything here is based on the stack emissions. The end flue repairs will also affect how many stack emissions there are. So that's what this consent decree is for, is stack emissions, the end flues, and the maintenance of the battery itself. A good running battery will not have stack emissions. So that's really the test of whether the battery is running well, is the stack emissions. Now, in 2014, we were working on that locally. We'll go on to the next slide. 2014, now this is a consent order, this was a consent order agreement, it became a decree, we did go into state court with this. This was between us, Shenango, and the state court. So now it does not do the stack because there's already a consent decree for the stacks. This is to do with some other things. Now there were some repairs that needed to be done. We had a lot of fugitive emissions. So what we required and they agreed to is they were going to replace all the sheeting on the pushing emission control. There's a shed. When you push the emissions out, there's a shed to capture the emissions. But over the years, it had rotted. It deteriorates, and there's all kinds of leaks coming out of it. And we said, okay, within a certain amount of time, you're going to replace any sheets that are bad. They've done that. They came up with this, it's a bit of an innovative thing, is to have it extending the shed closer to the quench tower. Now there's a danger there because the quench tower is full of water and the shed can't have water in it. So you get too close, you have the chance of getting water from the quench tower into the shed area. But they designed it well, it seems to be working. And so that was part of the consent decree. The third is to have a bag house maintenance. We were having some problems with their bag houses. They put in a new maintenance plan. We approved it. They are operating a bag maintenance plan. And the fourth one was to take pushing emission values every day. We have inspectors out there. We have our inspectors out there every weekday. We have contract inspectors out there every day, and they have their inspectors out. Based on the pushing emissions, and that's the emissions when you actually push the cook out, they have to adjust their cooking time, extend the cooking time. Again, it's a condition of if the battery is not operating well, you're going to have emissions when you open the door and you push it out. So you either have to cook longer if the battery's not working well. So there's a calculation in there that you have to change your cooking time if your pushing emissions are out of compliance. So far, most of the time, it's been not an issue, but that's where, and so we get a daily count from their reviews and what our reviews, what the values are, and what the minimum cooking time has to be. They've mostly been above the minimum cooking time, so it's not been an issue. So that's the 2014. So you see, it's not like there's two different consent decrees on two different parts of the plant. Now that doesn't excuse anything. They are still required to follow all of our permit requirements, all of our regulations, and all of the federal regulations. There aren't any state regulations that relate directly to this plant, but federal, local, and the permit conditions, in addition to the two consent decrees. And so that's where we stand on the consent decrees. Now, the other question that Thaddeus was asking about was the electrical outages. And we'll go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about that. We have been meeting with Shenango. They have been meeting with Duquesne Light. And there's motion in progress. Again, most of you know there were some outages. There's been outages all the way back to 2006, but significantly this year. There was, I think, 6. I think I have them all listed there. 6 this year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. There were 7 this year. Some of them only last. The one only lasts 6 seconds. But the problem with it is, as soon as there's two electric lines that come into the plant, and if one goes down, the other one goes right into place. So, but even if it's 6 seconds, what happens is that because of safety issues, the boiler has to stop operating. And when a boiler shuts down, it takes a full 30 minutes for it to come back up again. All that time, the cook oven gas is not being pulled off the battery. So it has to be flared because it's a safety issue. You've got to take care of that. So that's been a problem. Now, the slides you were showing I think, Randy, you were showing before, the 2 outages this year that were the really bad ones. Now, we're still looking into the June 11th one, see what caused all that. The May incident was the one where the actual Larry car, the charging car, caught fire. Because when the power went down, the Larry car was stuck where it was, and it already had a lid open. So you have all this gas coming up, it catches fire, the Larry car catches. It was a few $1 million. They had the unit was down. It was very dangerous for their employees to deal with that incident because they lost the electricity. So what we have been, I don't think I have another slide off of this, right? Okay, it talks about the May event. And it just says the issues, but that, again, this is pretty much what I said. They were in the middle of charging, and because they were in the middle of charging when they lost the electricity, the Larry car, the traveling car, or the charging car caught fire, and there was a whole issue there. So what we're doing with them, or what they're doing, do I have another slide on there? Am I done? Okay. Shenango's been talking to us. They've been talking to Duquesne Light. Duquesne Light has been out and has looked at a number of places where there have been poor connection. It looks like that they have let a lot of the wiring deteriorate in the area. And they've gone through and they're checking it and correcting a lot of the electrical distribution where they've got it. Shenango and Duquesne Light have been walking the lines and checking everything on to see if what needs to be changed and if there can be reconnections in such a way that would prevent this shutdown, even a 6-minute or 6-second shutdown. They're still working on that. They're still looking at that. What our part is we're in the process of getting a consultant to go into the plant to look at all of their actions during an outage, which will be anything, including electric outage, but this is the more predominant one and the more one of concern, is to go through their process during electric outage and say, is everything that can be done, done? And if not, why not? What will it cost? And then we're going to require them to do it. We have to go through the process and find out what's out there, what can happen. So that's what we're in the middle of right now. We're in the process of putting out a request for proposals for a consultant that has the talent to be able to understand coke plants and go in and do that process. They're going to review everything that happens during an outage and give us recommendations and says, okay, it would be better if you can do this. It can be better if you installed this. It'd be better. And then we work from there. So that's where we are right now in the electric outages. We believe that with the work that Duquesne Light's already done, of course, it's going to be less often that there'll be outages. But we want to be a place where it doesn't matter if there's electric outages, that the plant is still safe. That's where we need to be. We can't just say, okay, sorry, the electricity isn't working today. So that's where we're working on and what now. So that's it. I don't know, Dave, if you have anything to add to the activities. We've been working with EPA on Shenango. I know that you guys have been talking to EPA, and so we want to continue to work with them to have their help. And Jim's expertise is very helpful in what controls we can put in. So.
I'll just make a comment as a segue for David coming up. We're very, very interested in this consultant coming in and exploring the plant. So we're jointly excited. And as having been a almost double E by training, I understand a little bit about electrical situations and the fact that it can't always be the supplier who's at fault. So maybe they were drawing too much current. What do you think? That happens in your house when your circuit breaker clicks off, doesn't it? So I think they described it as an unexplained fault that occurred. So maybe we can investigate that a bit more. Okay. So Dave, would you please come up, and whoever else you might have. Okay.
Hi, my name is Dave Arnold with the Environmental Protection Agency in the Philadelphia office. Thanks, Ted, for the invitation. Thanks, everybody at ACAN. I do not have prepared remarks. I don't want to bore you guys. I think you're probably wondering, well, who is Dave, and what is he doing in Philadelphia to help the situation? So, I grew up in Beaver County. Spent the first 20 years of my life living across from a coke plant owned by J&L Steel. So I do have some understanding of what it's like to live near a coke plant. To give you a sense of our role versus the county health department's role, some of you may know it, but it's probably good to have that understanding. The Federal Clean Air Act, which charges EPA with cleaning up the environment, also establishes a section of it that the states and local governments have the right and the ability to implement laws and develop air pollution plans. So that is the case in Pennsylvania. The State Air Pollution Control Act actually provides the authority for Allegheny County as well as Philadelphia County to exist and run an environmental program. So what do? We do have an oversight function. We believe it's a helpful function. Not everyone likes to see EPA show up and ask what they're doing, but I will say I've known Jamie for over 30 years. There's probably no one in the Mid-Atlantic area that has more knowledge and the ability to run a program. So I tip my hat to Jamie. It's a lot of tough issues out here, so she does a great job. So we have an oversight role. We also have sort of a technical assistance role, a financial assistance role. So we do support the program financially. And we also support it technically. So that's why I brought our senior inspector, Jim Hagedorn, along. He is our guy. We used to have many. We now have one due to retirements. And I will say it's very difficult to get the younger generation interested in this kind of environmental work. Don't know why that is, but it is. Engineers coming out now, in fact, we lost a couple a few years ago to the oil and gas industry. We just cannot compete salary-wise with some of those entities. But anyway, Jim is here, and he is here to provide support to the county. Zelma Maldonado, our enforcement chief, is here. And I think we're now at a stage, we've had many discussions with Jamie and her staff, where we now are a full team, and we will bring all the federal resources that we have to help address this situation. And I know there's been discussions about consent decrees and reopening, and there's certain things I can't discuss as an enforcement officer. It's not appropriate to discuss certain things, but I will tell you we are looking at all the options. We're looking at the current consent decree, at least the federal consent decree, to make sure that we haven't missed anything. The document is huge, so it's very easy to overlook something. So we're looking at that. We're looking at all the regulations. As Jamie said, it's not just the consent decree. There are a lot of federal and county rules that we want to make sure we're not missing anything. Because what you see in the video over there, in my mind, is totally unacceptable. So with that, again, I don't want to go through a bureaucratic speech. I hate them myself. You guys probably do too. So I'm looking forward to having some discussions either during the Q&A session or after the meeting is over. I would be happy to have some discussions with you guys. So, thanks again for the invitation. We don't often get out to Allegheny County in my home area from years ago, so we do appreciate it. Thank you.
So we don't have anyone talking from either one of the groups further? Just checking? Okay. Okay. So just as a sideline with meeting Dave for the first time in Philadelphia, we realized that I think we're about the same era. I graduated from New Brighton High School in Beaver County. Fierce rivals with Rochester High School. And I don't know if we won any games against you or not. I give up. I can't remember that far back. And I think we both speak the same language, Western Pennsylvanese or something like that. And just as another aside, there was something called the ABC Drive-In in Baden. And it was right across the river from the JNL Steelworks. Okay? And we were amazed between movies, you could see the furnace open up. It was like fireworks. It was, wow, isn't that great? And then molten slag got poured down the riverbank into the river. It was like Mordor. We didn't know about Mordor then. Okay. We thought that was terrific. We didn't know any better. But now we know so much more, I think. Okay. So thank you for being here. I think we'll go into our next piece of the program where there may be some Q&A for people who have spoken. And then after that, we have some testimony or some comments. Testimony sounds too rigid. We want to hear what people have on their minds, especially when it comes to being harmed.
You want me to go through our list of asks?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Angelo is my other part of my brain. I'm glad we have him. And we want to just go through our ask again. It feels like rubber bullets bouncing off a Sherman tank, but we keep on trying. So Angelo's going to recite our litany of asks one more time.
At this time, ACAN has basically two categories of asks. One that we spoke about before in terms of reopening the 2012 and 2014 consent agreements, consent decrees, and that relates to the petitions the blue petitions on your chairs. Now I know, Jamie, you mentioned that you have a different approach to that, and I'm sure we'll be having discussions. Our second category of asks were things that we really wanted EPA and the health department to do immediately, things that we felt should be done immediately to address the pollution issues. And the first one is to immediately increase monitoring, that is the monitoring that the health department inspectors do at the Shenango site. And that this monitoring should include afternoon, night, and weekend inspections. Right now, the inspections are only during the daylight shift, and if you do the calculations, based on the calculations that we did, we think that the health department inspectors are only on site about 12% of the time. So when they say that there were a certain number of violations, it's really violations only during the time when they're doing the inspections. It doesn't take into account all that the other time, the other almost 90% of the time. The second ask is to hire a consultant to recommend pollution prevention improvements at the plant. Based on what we've seen, we believe that Shenango is not proactive concerning pollution prevention. The third ask is to require Shenango to curtail operations on bad air days. And our thinking there is that the government asks us to curtail our activities, our driving, our lawn mowing, et cetera, on bad air days, and yet Shenango isn't asked to do the same thing. The fourth ask relates to what Randy Sargent from CNU indicated in his presentation, and that is that if there were cameras on site, on the Shenango site, we would better be able to identify where emissions were coming from, and that information would be very useful for enforcement and repair. So we're asking for the installation of on-site cameras. The fifth ask is that the plant cannot operate without all pollution controls functioning. But we know for a fact that Shenango is allowed to release toxic hydrogen sulfide for up to 2 weeks while a pollution control unit is shut down for maintenance. That just is not acceptable. The sixth ask is for the regulation of all emissions on the site. Current regulations don't address some sources of emission, and we feel that that needs to be addressed because there are a lot of sources there that are putting off emissions, and they're just not looked at based on current regulations. The last ask is that there be timely publication of DTE Shenango violations on the Health Department's website. These are presently not put on the website at all. Those are our seven asks that we feel can be done and worked on immediately. Thank you.
Okay, now we get to have some interaction. So we had some cards passed out for Q&A. So do we have those cards? Okay. Yes.
About the procedure here. These demands are demands of the people that are here, like the health department. And I'm just wondering whether they could be asked to respond to how they're going to respond to each of these that you're demanding.
What do you think, Health Department and EPA? We don't mean to put you on the spot too much, right?
Well, I'm not sure I can respond to all of them, but there's some things that I can speak to. Our third coke oven inspector, Beryl Denny, retired this past April or May, and so we've been down to 2 coke plant inspectors. Now realize that we have 2 inspectors for everything else, and we have 2 for coke plants. I am happy to say that we have recently hired a 3rd one back again. And she's right now doing her final training, and when she gets fully trained, then she will be able to, she has serious experience at coke plants, so it's not that kind of training. It's just a matter of the procedures and the regulations that she'll be inspecting. So we're very pleased that we'll be able to increase inspection. There are some limitations to nighttime inspections, as those that have done smoke reading know that there's only so many things you can look at because you can't read smoke in a legal term during the nighttime. But there are some things that we can do, and we are looking at that. Also, as also is good news, is that we've been pushing, and finally we are going to have a second attorney that is dedicated to air quality activity. He's not here yet, but he's weeks away. So by the end of the year, we'll have a second attorney to help us with enforcement activities. And so that's going to help us greatly with Shenango, as well as Clairton Coke Works and all the other things we've got going on. We've got a number of asbestos issues going on. So having a second man or in this case, man, to assist us is going to help us a great deal. So, I mean, not all of these. We've talked about the on-site camera. We're not sure. I mean, that's something Randy's been looking at, is to see whether or not it was viable. We have to, because he picked a stack. It's a question of whether it can be done. We just don't know what can and can't be done. And if it can be done, will it still be able to be used as an enforcement tool? There's a whole process to use a camera as an enforcement tool, so we have to go through that. But we are looking at it, and we're looking at that sort. So I can't talk about all of them, but I can speak to those, I guess, right now. Our website, we're always trying to improve our website. We're always a bit behind. As a county, we have one webmaster for the entire health department. We have been looking at how to put both complaints and violations, because that's been repeatedly requested as some sort of an information. How do we put them up there in a way that makes sense? So that sort of thing. So I guess those are the ones I can respond to immediately. The rest of them I need to take back and take to staff and work through.
While you're still up there, Mr. Cranville has a question.
Is your extra inspector going to get us back to 12%, or will it take us to 18% inspection?
Well, I'm not sure where the 12% comes from. We have, like I said, I said earlier, we have an inspector that goes out there every workday. We also have a contractor that goes out there every day. I'm not sure 12%. I think it's.
So what is the percentage then?
I would have to. I'm not sure. And like I said, there's very little inspection you can actually do at night. It's limited. We can put inspectors out there.
Well, I have to close my windows when I go to sleep because of that plan. So
Me too.
Maybe you should think about inspecting.
May I comment? Isn't there a rule or a capability that lighting is possible? To put in light, some sort of light arrangement?
I'd have to read the rules on smoke readers. I don't have to see how that.
Sue Seppi's here from Gas. She knows more than I do. But that's a possibility.
That's a possibility.
We can look into that. Okay. Any other Q&A in general?
I have one. It seems like if you were home tonight, and there was a fire in your house, you would call the fire department without the fire. This thing's been going on long before I ever came to Avalon. 100% those violations all the way across the board. Don't you have any power to stop it?
Yeah.
Shut down the plant? Nothing. The Board of Health has nothing. The EPA has no say. Fines aren't going to do anything. It's just a payoff for everybody on board. And it just goes on year after year after year. Why can't the fire be put out?
Okay, that would be a very long question, long answer to go to a question. There are federal rules that a battery has to abide by. They actually meet all the federal rules.
That meets all the federal rules?
That meets all the federal rules. The county rules are significantly tighter than the federal rules. When EPA was in the process of writing the federal rules, I was very young then, but we sent down our head enforcement person, actually a person from GASP, and a number of other people from this area. And around the country, they said, we cannot abide by the rules that Allegheny County requires of the plants. And so the Coke plants actually are in compliance with federal rules. They're not entirely in compliance with our rules. There are exceptions and there are violations, and that's what we're working on and we're continuing to work on with our guys.
How can it be compliant with federal rules if you're violating the consent decree of clean air and clean water?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know that they are violating the consent orders. That's what I want to fine tooth, because on the surface they are complying with the consent order.
Did you cite it in the consent decree that they were in violation of the Clean Air Act and clean water?
No, the federal consent order was for the stack emissions, and they are in compliance with the federal consent order for the stack emissions. Most of the federal rules are 30-day rolling averages. So your emissions are based on what happened over 30 days. We don't like that. We don't, as a county, we do not very well.
Step up a little bit, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania needs to step up to deal with this, because this can't be an okay on federal. We might as well move to China. You know? Really, think about it. There's no regulation here. I can tell you what some of that smoke is. Some of it's unburnt diesel fuel. Some of it's soot. I know it. It goes on my porch every month. You come a month later, I clean my porch. It's like I haven't touched it in years. At 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a roar. If I go to the bathroom, the whole window shakes. There's a roar for 15 minutes. What the hell is they doing over there? It sounds like a jet engine. They're running something at night. Your inspection should be at night as well as today, maybe even more.
Why don't we take a short comment from here?
Okay.
Okay. I think we've just segued into comments. And we can state how we're feeling, and maybe you've already registered for comments, I don't know. But the requirement for comments is you need to be a resident of their communities, and if you're a worker and a resident, that's great. We'd love to have you say a few words. If you think you've been impacted by the air, and by the way, if you live in Pittsburgh, the East End even, you've probably been impacted both by our Coke Works and the other Coke Works, amongst other things. Okay? So with that thought in mind, so we'll have some comments, and if anyone from the EPA or ACHD feels to comment, wants to, they're welcome to. But I think more now we're going to express our ire and maybe our frustration. How's that sound? Okay. So first on the list I have from Ben Ave and Ray Winter. Would you come up? And if you can be so kind as to be dense with your comments, meaning maybe 2 to 3 minutes. I think Father John said, you used to teach at Duquesne University, right? And it was a wonderful explanation. He says, I will only take 2 to 3 minutes. I taught my students how to do a sermon in 2 to 3 minutes. Boy, I'd like to be at one of those sermons. So we can take a lead from Father John, maybe, okay?
Yes, I'm 65 years old, and I have lived in this area for 65 years. To the people of Avalon, when I was a child growing up, every morning we had black soot and silver soot inside our windowsills. If you wanted to use the patio furniture, Mom had to clean it every day. If you were outside playing in the summertime, you had to come in because the smell was so bad, Mom was afraid for our lives. It's 2015. I'm still cleaning the soot off my furniture outside. I don't like to sit outside. I work outside. I have to come in. Year's 2015. That was, 50 years ago I was going through the same nonsense. At night you want to sleep, and all of a sudden you wake up with a burning sensation in your throat, you wake up with a burning sensation in your nose, and you start hacking and coughing, and you have to close your windows in all that heat. You cannot enjoy it. Thank you.
So Ray, you now currently live in Ben Avon?
Yes.
Correct?
48 years.
48 years in Ben Avon. He moved out of Avalon, but not far enough away, I guess. I'm sorry? Emsworth? Okay. So if you're familiar with how the prevailing winds work from across Shenango, they're generally from the south-southwest, and the ground zero is Avalon, where the monitor is. Thank you for placing it there. And then it fans out from there. So Emsworth is on one edge, Brighton Heights is on another edge, and on particularly strange days, it'll go anywhere, okay, including down to a Steeler game. Okay, so next is Louis Bram, Bellevue. You're down here. You want to say some more?
No, one thing I wanted to ask is you say like about violations that they're not in violation, but when they are in violation, you fine them. But how do you give the fines any teeth if they're only like $500? I mean, are you going to give them change the violation procedure so that they're a higher level of actually give it the violations and the regulations some teeth? It actually means something because right now it's just the cost of doing business. They do not care. It means nothing to them. So I just want that question.
And maybe I can segue into that. My understanding, you tell me if I'm wrong, that when you have a consent decree placed, you put a cap on the violation?
In the consent decree itself, for that action, there is a set amount of money.
There's a set amount of money.
For any other regulation, it goes in our regular enforcement.
Okay, so, but we'll talk about the consent decree violations that have been covered. So what that suggests is, if I got it right, that if that violation occurs again, it's still the same amount of money.
Depends on the consent decree.
It depends on consent decree. So, in other words, if you or I get a traffic ticket, it's like, say, you've got an agreement with the cop, you might say, that if you find me guilty again of a traffic violation, you won't give me any stricter fine than what I had before. Is that a good analogy?
Depends on the consent decree.
Maybe it depends on the cop in this case, okay? So that's how I read that. So some of them happen that way, okay, and some of them don't, okay? How about Janet Strahowski of Avalon? Would you please come up? So we can't hear you. We can't hear you from here. You're not bashful. Come on. I've heard you speak before.
I've been known to holler.
I'll stand behind you.
This has been a lovely show. I appreciate it. I have heard it before. We have all heard it before. We have proof now to our complaints that have been going on for as long as I can remember. I want to know how many consent decrees do they need before something can be done about shutting Shenango. They are a bad neighbor. They have been a bad neighbor, and I don't expect it to get any better. There's a balance of power, profits versus losses, their profits versus our health losses. There is nothing they can do to make things better for us other than going out of business. So my new mantra is get them out of there. That's all I have to say.
Next we have Scott Bressler from Avalon.
Basically just saying, everyone said everything I had to say at this point. It's a property value issue, obviously a health issue.
Come on up.
And just things like the soot coming underneath our baseboards. You can see it around the edges of the rooms, the carpeting, the furniture. Everyone's covered everything that I had to say. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, well, we appreciate you being here, but I think you would be so much better up here, though. Please don't be shy. Okay, so some more anecdotal evidence that things aren't right, even though the monitors may say something else or the violations seem to be in order, but the citizenry is saying, I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, let me go to Matt Rind of Bellevue. Matt? You're so You're so vocal when we're together, though. But we can't, the mic, the...
I think previous comments I just say amen to.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Melanie Holcomb. She's not shy. And Melanie's in Ben Avon.
Hi, my name is Melanie Holcomb. I'm a Ben Avon resident for 15 years. I've lived and worked and owned small business in town. I used to be very proud of this neighborhood. I worked here before I moved here. I loved it. I'm not proud of it anymore. When I was in my business, it was a coffee shop down the street, and people would come in when they were shopping for homes and say, "Tell me about the neighborhood. Do you like it?" "Oh, it's perfect. Great schools, wonderful neighbors, beautiful stuff." I quit saying that after a few years. And I'm not saying that anymore. I'm saying the opposite. Friends of mine are moving, not out of Pittsburgh, but out of this area. They're staying in the Avamore School District because they like it, but they're getting out of this zone because they have children and they want them to grow up in a slightly healthier environment. I'm tired of being on the worst list. I'm tired of being the worst polluters, tired of being on the highest cancer risks. I'm tired of neighbors fighting on Facebook and the next door sites about, "Quit talking about this, it's bringing attention, you're gonna lower our property values." We want to improve our neighborhood. We want to raise the standard of our living. We want to make our property values better because you don't look out your beautiful windows and see that and smell that. I didn't grow up here in Pittsburgh, so I can't say, as some people have said to me, it's so much better than it used to be. There's a lot of things that used to be that aren't anymore. Polio, drunk driving, because a bunch of moms got mad and got together and laws changed. And moms are getting mad. Some other things that used to not be. A lot of my neighbors used to not have cancer. When you look at any of those cancer maps, we are smack in it. Benzene is everywhere on all of the emissions that we've talked about. On the American Cancer Society website, it's listed as a big carcinogen. There is no safe level of benzene, and we're living in it. Ben Avon itself, this neighborhood, is a top earner for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society every year. They have a Light Up the Night fundraiser, and we raise a crap ton of money because we know people in this neighborhood, down the block, 3 blocks that way, 2 blocks that way, that have leukemia, and these are parents of children in this neighborhood. It's a backhanded thing to be proud of, that we're the top earner. It's very personal to us, and we don't know who to go to anymore. I was here last year. I've been to a lot of meetings. I got frustrated, as everybody is here. There's people in Detroit that are getting rich off of our decline. Last year, we talked about these same things. We went to protests, we signed petitions all year. I went to DC and I talked to Mr. Doyle and Mr. Casey about it. I've been to the city-county building. I don't want to be standing here again next year talking about the same things to the same people with the same lack of result. My last thought is that I know that the politics of this are hard, and I know that the webs and the strings that you have to crawl through to get anything done is difficult. But there's a lot of things that we're living with that are difficult. It's difficult for the school nurse to keep track of all the inhalers in her school. It's difficult for us to drive our neighbors to chemo. It's difficult to have chemo. It's difficult to have heart surgery. And it's really, really difficult to go to the funerals of mothers who've left 4 children behind. And the 2 people who I know most in this neighborhood who came down with this disease were runners. And what do you do when you run? You go out into the neighborhood and you breathe every day this air, more than I do, because I stay in. And they were braver than I am. And they still are, because they're going through leukemia. So I know that that sounds hyperbolic, and I don't mean it to be that way, but it's the flippin' fact. I look at this little brown paper map here that one of our artists drew for the church, and I just want to put labels on every house. Breast cancer, leukemia, you know, both husband and wife breast cancer in this house. It's just a map of the failure of us to protect ourselves. And we don't have anyone else to do that but you. So please do that.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for being so eloquent. We have Benjamin Salbach Welsh from McKees Rocks.
Hello, everyone. I don't think many people get my name right on the first try, so thank you. I very much appreciate that. That was spot on. I grew up in the wilds of PA. My family was very blessed to have a spring and have our own source of water and be self-sufficient in that way. And, you know, fracking, of course, has been a major source of concern for us. I've been conscious of environmental issues for quite a while. I moved into the city for school in 2004. It's been 11 years. And of all the places I've lived around, even Oakland with all of its gridlock, when I moved to McKees Rocks in August, I don't think the pollution has been as bad anywhere else in the city that I have lived. It's to the point that my family is wondering whether some of the health issues I've been experiencing since I moved there are a result of the air quality and the air quality issues. It's to the point that when the wind's blowing just right, like my parents are encouraging me, don't open your windows, don't leave them closed. And I love clean air. It's such an important thing to me. I do a lot of deep breathing. It's very important as much as any other source of life. It's a basic need and a basic necessity. I want to read you a comment from my father, if I can find it. My father is not a man who has a particularly keen sense of smell. But just the other day, I had the window open, and he passed by it, and he was coming to visit. And he made the comment that he used to work at an oil refinery, but the smell he got from that open window in my bathroom was as bad as anything he smelled walking next to the tanks. I'm relatively new to this. I mean, I just moved here. I've got a beautiful little house up on a hill looking down in Pittsburgh. I'd love to stay. But this is a serious concern, even as far away as McKees Rocks. So thank you for all your work, everyone, and keep it up. Thank you.
We have Nick Stokes from Pittsburgh. And by the way, Pittsburgh covers a big area for an address area. If you live in Ben Avon, you have a Pittsburgh address, 15202. So we get to co-join with the city that way. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Nick Stokes, and I work with an organization called Rising Tide. And I appreciate all of the testimony that I've heard today, and I just want to extend Rising Tide's support to the work that you all are doing and everything that you all are going through, and say that we stand behind you in the fight against Shenango and the stuff that's happening. The only piece that I sort of wanted to add to this, and it's, you know, I appreciate all of the technical data that folks are offering, but it also strikes me that this is a political issue as well. And it's a political issue in the sense that it's a David and Goliath issue, right? Because a lot of it is us as community members up against really giant corporations with extensive resources and extensive money to be able to influence how regulations and things get passed. And on the air quality subcommittee, half of the members of that subcommittee represent industry interests in some way, right? Or if they don't represent industry interests directly, they are tied to industry interests because they facilitate or defend in a court of law industry interests. And I think that that is one of the most kind of critical aspects of things that we need to look at in this. And we're not going to get justice in Shenango and a lot of other places that are going through similar things that you all are going through unless we take on that piece also and start calling some attention to those entities and the influence that they have over the way that regulations get moved and the teeth behind those regulations, right? So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Mark Dixon, and he's a pretty shy person. Oh, by the way, he's taking a video of our whole session this evening. If any of you have a problem with having the back of your head on the video or speaking in front of a camera, please see Mark.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I live in Highland Park, and I've submitted at least 20 complaints to the ACHD in this 2015 year. Every time I step outside and it stinks, I email them. I come, because I usually go jogging. I'm one of those joggers, and I'm not looking forward to my cancer. But I don't have cancer right now, as far as I know, but I don't want it. And so I turn around and go inside every time I smell the air. And I complain to the ACHD, and they always tell me it's an inversion, and there's nothing we could do. We're working on it. And so 20 times later, I also asked for a report of all the complaints into the ACHD since the start of 2015. And there were over 2,000 complaints about all sorts of things, not just air quality, like not just this, but I did a little search in that list for Shenango, and it came up 600 times. Some of those are double entries, so I suspect at least 300 approximate complaints about Shenango were submitted to the ACHD just this year. I have some written remarks. I'm going to read them now. I call on you tonight to listen and then act. And do not disregard us as calling out from the fringe of public opinion. We are calling out from the very center of your moral soul. We are calling out from the past, the present, and the future. For you, in this critical moment, to heed the warnings given voice tonight and act while there is still time to proceed with a shred of your moral dignity intact. We call out today from the center of common sense and decency in a city where our lungs burn with the foul stench of coking gases and coal emissions released into a weather system prone to temperature inversions. Are we crazy to think that we have a right to clean air as mentioned in the state constitution? Are we unjustified in our outrage over Pittsburgh's woeful spot near the top of the worst polluted urban areas in the country? Are we wild-eyed when we highlight how Article 21 of the Allegheny County Health Department's rules and regulations states that no person shall operate or allow to be operated any source in such manner that emissions of malodorous matter from such source are perceptible beyond the property line of such source? We call out from the future to remind you that the sources of the foul emissions assaulting our lungs are not just violations of our Constitution and local laws. They are an insult to future generations who are looking to us to immediately and dramatically cut our carbon emissions. Do you know that at the upcoming COP21 climate negotiations in Paris, our government officials will be working hard to find a path to keep our global temperature below 2°C above pre-industrial levels? Do you know that they're working towards plans that primarily give us only a 66% chance of achieving that goal? that all IPCC plans keeping us below 2C involve a massive CO2 removal from the atmosphere? Do you know that the fringe United Nations estimates that global commitments to date bring us to 2.7C? Do you know that if we want a 90% chance of staying below 2C, then we need to stop all carbon emissions today?
Yes.
Do you know that one of our country's leading climate scientists, James Hansen, calls the 2C target catastrophic and advocates for a target of 1C? Why then are any carbon emissions legal in this day and age? Least of all, the horribly toxic and smelly ones like we have around here. Is there any justification for government inaction on this front? And finally, we call out from the past to ask you that you not waste this precious democracy for which so many have bravely worked, fought, and died for, on the spurious notion that it will all turn out okay no matter what you fail to do. Climate change is a problem whose solution has a time limit, and we must honor our past by proving to the future that our governmental structure, our dear democracy, has the capacity to meaningfully address the climate crisis, or that government may well be sacrificed to the global unrest caused by climate change itself. If you fear the thought of disrupting the status quo, just wait and see what your own inaction will do. If you fear the thought of jeopardizing your own career prospects, just imagine what your own conscience will do to you late at night when you consider the meaning of your life during this most critical time in human history. The burning lungs of Pittsburgh residents are the canaries in the coal mine when it comes to climate change. Will you heed our rational pleas to address the foul-smelling insults of our day, or will you let us suffer while the world burns, and with it, your moral dignity? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for connecting the canary in the coal mine, or the litmus test that we have right here. So we have local issues to deal with that contribute to climate change. And last on my card is Leo Kelly of Moon. Is Leo here?
I don't know on your list, but I would like to speak. I live in Emsworth. I'm on Emsworth Council.
Please come up. We didn't recognize you. You're shy, are you?
Sometimes I am.
Okay, so please state your name, and you live in Emsworth.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm Daniel Lenz. I'm on Emsworth Council. Next month will be my second year. I'm on a 4-year term. I just finished MS4 compliancy training last month. And one of the unique subjects of this is how DEP is going to come into your borough, and if you are not in compliant, we're going to just fine the hell out of you. And there is a borough that was fined $140,000 because they didn't do their compliancy according to DEP in Allegheny County. So, I mean, come on now. They're over there killing people, but, you know, the federal government, let me tell you about the federal government. I think they stink. And the reason for that is I watch a lot of air disaster shows. Not that I want to see people die. I want to see what brought the airliner down. And one of the sad parts of NTSB investigating, they have no teeth. They make recommendations to FAA, who puts out the rules and regulations. And they've had numerous second crashes because FAA did not act, and more people died. It's called tombstone technology. And until the federal government puts more bite in what they're doing over there, nothing's going to change. More people are going to get sick, more people are going to die. You have to change it from the top and make them accountable. And these little piddly fines that you're levying against them are nothing. And you're going to fine a little borough $140,000 and almost bankrupt them? Thank you.
I think Roger Cranville, where did he go? Yeah, he's would like to say a few words, and then you next, okay? Roger lives in Kilbuck Township, so we have a lineup of boroughs along the river, and behind it we have townships, okay?
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for your noble efforts. I have 4 questions and a request. First of the 4 questions. How many violations is it going to take? I think we deserve an answer to that. Second question. Why is the EPA here tonight? Are you listening to what you're hearing? I see 1 nod. I got to 2. I got 3. That was a bit sort of tacit. And to follow up on that, can you come back next year? Number 3. How can Chester Babst represent Shenango and be objective on Fitzgerald's Committee for Air Quality? And now the request. Can you all get your calendars out, because we'll be back here next year, I suspect. Thank you very much.
There was another person. Come on up.
I'll just stand here. I can talk loud. My name is Kate. I am from the Rocks also.
McKees Rocks.
McKees Rocks.
Right.
The Rocks.
The Rocks.
Anyway, it's more of a comment. I walk a lot and walk across the McKees Rocks Bridge, and I noticed the fire from Shenango. I have no idea. I'm not originally from this side of town. I was from Green Tree, Crafton Green Tree area. And, but I asked people about the fire, and they said, oh yeah, it's Never Island. It was like surreal to me that nobody knew anything, or they don't know, but nobody talked about it or thought about it or were so used to it or something. And I just would look at it. My grandson was here visiting me this summer, and he took pictures from down the railroad tracks. Because you can see it.
And she's talking about the flare.
The fire, that thing right there. I mean, it was just like amazing to me. And then people say Shenango, and I think West Virginia. I mean, I'm so glad to be here. And the only way I found out about this particular thing was at the movie on last Friday evening. Right. So I'm glad to know we'll go to my council and present this, because I feel like something we need to gather as a group, but to be pessimistic, I'm like really wondering if anything can ever be done about any of this. I feel like I played whack-a-mole all my life. And just as something seems to get done, and I don't want to get brutalized like the people in the film, not that I wouldn't take a frontline position, but it's like over and over and over again. This does go on, and what Mark said is this is the past. People talk they lived here in the past, dirt, soot. Now, I don't have that. My windows are open right now at home, and I leave them open. It'll break my heart to close them tonight, but I guess I'm going on. What I really wanted to say was I've been looking at that fire and wondering, I knew it couldn't be good.
Thank you. Where's our operator here? A segue to the movie that we all saw. This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein. So you have handouts at your seats. We're getting another special showing. We're co-sponsoring it with the Parkway Theater on the 30th at 7:30, so please be there. They talk a lot about people being on the front lines. We're on the front lines here. We're on the front lines here. But we're not making as big a fuss as they are we? But we could. We could. Not yet. So that being said, I think we're finished for this evening, unless our guests from the EPA or ACHD would like to make any closing comments, or I could close. Everybody looks weary. It's a long drive from Philadelphia. Okay, they made it in today. Yes, Frank.
On the address, EPA.
Okay. Frank is the husband of, can I introduce you that way? Karen Grozwinski, who has been a long-time advocate of cleaner air. She's been a fellow smoke reader or emissions evaluator. We've hung out too many times watching Shenango from behind the Metro Motors. And I think she's paying the price right now. She has extreme asthma conditions, and neither she or I don't go there anymore. Okay.
I am a former criminal prosecutor with the Attorney General's office. And I was on a joint task force. At one time, used to have a criminal investigator with the EPA, with an FBI agent, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I was specially sworn as a U.S. Attorney. I know that not only do you have the right to open the consent agreement, you have the right to investigate Shenango criminally and civilly. I would ask EPA to take these films back to Washington, D.C. and Region 3 and do an investigation.
I didn't know that. Okay. I didn't ask. You don't know what you don't know. Okay. It's approaching 8:30. Technically, we said we'd be here for about 2 hours. We went over that a bit, and thank you for most of you staying. I really appreciate it. So it's good to see the turnout, and thank you very much for our guests for being here. I hope we didn't rub you the wrong way too much.